I traveled abroad as a disabled person. Here's how it went. Hey everybody, my name is Corn, and just a reminder that I use they and them pronouns, and you can follow me on social media under Candy Corn. Let's jump in. Now this video will sort of be a jumble of topics, starting with my general accommodations for travel, what I packed and why, a little summary of the trip itself, some reflections on what worked and what didn't work, as well as a travel Q&A with the most pressing questions you submitted on my Instagram story a couple of weeks ago. Now I won't be offended if you jump around this video a bit because it is a bit long, but I do think you'll find the full thing helpful. So don't forget about the playback speed options to make it faster or slower based on your preferences, and of course, feel free to use the chapters on the side if you need them. Otherwise, let's jump in. So for context, we've been planning this trip to Korea for almost 3 years because I've never been as a Korean American, so it meant a lot to me to finally make the trip over, and we decided to visit Japan as well because it's close by and I have a special interest in Pokemon. And by we planning, I mean my partner, as I'm absolutely horrible at planning more complex things and won't pretend like I could. And on that note, we're diving into my top accommodations for myself traveling as an autistic, ADHD, and chronically ill person. Not handling the planning. Like I said, I don't do any of the planning for travel, and that's probably one of my biggest accommodations. I know some autistic people love this part of planning. I do not. Quite frankly, I get too overwhelmed researching when there's that many variables, and more importantly, I have a partner who's good at it and likes doing it. So full transparency, he handled it all. From planning the trip, navigating the airport, to day-to-day vacation scheduling. But I was still an active part of that process, so let me summarize the big pre-trip steps. Around a year in advance, we booked the flights. And this was sort of a process because we both have airline reward cards that we've been saving points on for many years to book this flight, which means spots were pretty limited to do it this way, but when we did get them, we were able to book some very fancy business class seats, which I'll talk a bit more about later. Around 6 months in advance were the hotels and lodging. Around a month in advance, we booked some of the more busy activities like going to a specialty cafe, but this largely depends on the place, so you'll want to see when those reservations actually open up. But most popular attractions you can usually book a couple days advance or even the day of, and that goes for transit too. Which brings me to scheduling and itinerary accommodations. If you're the type of autistic person that thrives with a detailed schedule, please make that. But where I find most folks go astray in planning travel itineraries is overbooking themselves, not creating enough time to tackle transitions physically and mentally, divulging too much from your regular schedule, as well as not building in enough breaks. And honestly, that could be its own point, so let's do it. Make time for all the breaks. And accounting for all of these things means my travel schedule usually looks much lighter than my normal schedule to account for time to acclimate and adjust. To give an example, our vacation days usually follow this pattern. Get up at 7 a.m., which is the time I wake up every day, and get breakfast at 8 a.m. because I can't start the day without food. Give 2 hours to let my stomach sit in case something doesn't agree, shower, and get ready for the day. 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., have the primary activity planned. 2 to 3 hours is about the max time I like to be out, knowing my own personal energy levels. Then we would get lunch and go back to the hotel to rest and assess next steps. If I was too tired, we would spend the rest of the night in, get takeout, etc. If I was still feeling okay, we would plan a second 2-hour-ish activity in the evening, and that's it. If you can't be out from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. normally, why would you be able to do that on vacation? And I know that means not being able to see or do everything you want, but you'll actually feel good during the trip, not experience as much flare-ups, and not need a vacation from your vacation when you get home, which I value a lot more. Bring every accommodation you can, and I mean everything. Have a favorite fidget? Bring it. Noise-canceling headphones? Of course. A comfort sweatshirt? Yep. I know a lot of folks are looking for ways to lighten their suitcase, but if there's one area you shouldn't go light on, it's any item that brings you comfort as a disabled person. For me, that's usually a Pokemon-related item, a fidget, my cane, my cooling neck fan, my noise-canceling headphones, masks, comfy clothing, and all my safe products. Which brings me to packing anything else integral to your routine. I hate the feeling of rough pillowcases, so I brought my own. I don't like the smell of hotel shampoos or other products, so I brought every single product that I use on a daily basis. I know I struggle with finding snacks I can actually eat, so I brought my own. If you're questioning whether or not you should bring something, just bring it. There's nothing worse than having a meltdown over something that was completely avoidable. Which brings me to packing safe foods. If you have a pretty restrictive diet like me, it's always better to just bring your own safe foods from home. I was pretty fortunate because I knew I would be able to find safe foods on this trip, ramen and rice, but I wasn't sure about snacks, so I brought a lot. And in-flight meals have always been the bane of my existence because you never know what you're gonna get, even when you put in dietary restrictions, so I always bring backup foods. But if you're traveling out of country and have the extra task of translating labels, please do bring your own food to show your own comfort and safety, especially if you have very severe food allergies. And then there's timing. The timing of your trip. I get overheated super easily, so I know going anywhere in the summer is not an option. That's why we opted for spring, but we also knew this would draw in crowds for different reasons. The timing of activities. If you're planning on visiting touristy areas, please do some research on when they're most busy and, more importantly, less busy. Same goes for meals, transit, etc. Avoiding super popular times and rush hours will make it much more enjoyable for you if you hate big crowds. Make sure you have plenty of time between activities, flights, travel, so if something goes awry, you aren't rushing to get somewhere. And equally as important, make sure to give yourself plenty of time after your trip to rest and deal with that transition. Airport accommodations. As a disclaimer, most of these resources I don't personally use, as I'm a lower support needs autistic person with less mobility issues, but I wanted to include them in case they're helpful for you. If you contact the airline in advance, you can usually request guided assistance through the airport, pre-boarding or priority boarding, specialty seating like more leg room, centrally located to a bathroom, or located towards the front for faster deplaning, as well as general in-flight assistance. Some airports even have sensory rooms or quiet areas, which is pretty cool. You can also wear a sunflower lanyard or any other disability label that communicates you may need more time or patience. I always wear my pins. I can't carry my baggage, so I check it. And this is definitely a privilege that costs extra, but if you can get TSA pre-check or global entry, this makes the security process much smoother and less invasive. Same goes for nicer seats, which can be much more larger and comfortable. But then again, this can be so spendy, which is why we saved up all our points for these seats and probably won't travel like this again for years. But airport accommodations largely depend on the airport and airline, so make sure to call in advance to see what tools are at your disposal. In my case, have a trusted person do it for you. Lodging and transit accommodations. Be mindful of your lodging, not only the hotel and room itself, but where it's located. We knew we didn't want to be in areas with busy nightlife, so we booked in quieter areas. And particularly because walking long distances is difficult for me, we booked hotels that were near transit centers. And while transit is great, it also can be too crowded and unpredictable for me, which means we also ended up spending a lot of money on cabs and ride-sharing apps. These things can quickly add up, and it's a privilege to use them at all. But if you need them and have the ability to spend money on them, it's not money wasted. And to close this up, a very important disclaimer that accommodations for travel are very personal and should be catered to your individual needs, which means you may need to do additional research to figure out what those are. What works for me may not work for you, and vice versa. It also can be a privilege to travel at all, whether that's financially or physically, or have someone to support you through all of this like I do. And it's worth mentioning that even being low support needs and having all these accommodations, travel is still really hard for me. I can't prepare for everything and still frequently have meltdowns and shutdowns on vacation. That's why it's equally as important to have a plan for when things go awry, because they usually will. What I packed. In my carry-on, a personal sanitation kit including portable tooth cleaners, sanitizers, and lotions. General sanitation stuff, including alcohol wipes and tissues for cleaning surfaces. My cooling neck fan, because overheating is inevitable, especially while wearing a mask. My noise-canceling headphones, for sensory issues while traveling in loud spaces. Fidget toys, for stimming while traveling. My daily pills and medicine, Pepto, Lactate, ibuprofen, and birth control pills. My safe snacks, just in case I can't find food at the airport. My Switch, for staying entertained during long wait times. My drawing tablet for staying creative in my downtime, special interest items like my Pokemon lip balm and keychain, my pins for disability awareness and supporting human rights, and my cane, which also doubles as a much needed portable stool because I can't stand for longer durations, in my checked bag, or should I say bags, because I nested a smaller bag in my bag so we would have extra room to bring back goods, safe bathroom products. Any product I normally use daily is included here. A portable umbrella, because rain is in the forecast and I like to be prepared. Extra masks, because caring about your community is cool. Portable silverware, because I'm very particular about the size of mine. My pillowcase, because different case textures can cause me trouble sleeping. Outlet adapters to charge our devices in Korea, and some light makeup. I don't wear a lot, but I did bring mascara, liners, and powder. Let's pack that all up. And arguably the worst part of packing? Clothes. My general philosophy is to pack everything I may need, but still focusing on comfort and flexibility to be reworn. For planning, I like to lay out the bottoms and match each top I can wear with it to see if it's worth bringing. And then assess. This ended up being 9 light tops, 1 sweater, 3 bottoms, 2 sets of pajamas with socks and underwear for a 2-week trip with laundry access. And that's it for packing. But of course we can't forget the pup stuff. These guys are staying in very good company with my mom and her dog, but I already miss them. And yes, I'm that obsessed with my dog, so it was indeed a very tearful goodbye. And on that note, it's time to head out. The trip. First, we flew up to Seattle with a very generous layover waiting for the big flight. Then it was on to the 11-hour nonstop flight to Seoul. And I gotta say, these fancy seats made the time go by so fast. But it was still a full 20 hours of travel, so we were exhausted by the time we finally got to our hotel. So we stayed the night in. Day 1, Seoul, South Korea. We walked around Hongdae, and while we didn't find any open-minded boys, we did get figuratively robbed by way too many claw machines. Way too many. We also got one of the infamous portraits from Acorn Caricature, and then walked around a bit later. Day 2, now this was not a good day. We went to the mall, it was packed, I had a meltdown, we left, and I'll talk more about it in the trip afterthoughts. Day 3. We went to Gyeongbokgung Palace. I wore my first hanbok since I was a child, literally, and it was pretty magical walking around. Then we took the lift up to Namsan Tower, saw the love locks, and some cloudy but still beautiful views of Seoul. The tower was a little mid, but I did get some candy and was thankful we didn't attempt to walk up. We relaxed for quite a bit after getting back, and then did a bit of walking around Itaewon. Day 4. We went to Latte World, and you should know that I don't like visiting theme parks on vacation, but we made an exception because they had a Pokemon collab going on. And as an autistic person with a special interest in Pokemon, I was ecstatic. Truthfully, we only rode 2 rides and stayed for a couple of hours, but they actually had a pretty good selection of plushies and merch here I ended up buying. We walked around the mall afterwards, and I found the Ghibli store too and got some good photo ops. Then we stopped by the aquarium quickly since it was included in our ticket, plus my partner loves aquariums. Then we headed up to Latte World Tower, which was wildly cloudy, but it was really empty because it was a Monday, so we got to take some good photos and videos at least. Day 5. Now this was our last full day in South Korea, so we decided to do a bus tour because I love getting to see the city without walking, which took us to a few places we had already been, but I still enjoyed the hour or so ride. Our main stop of the day was Bukchon Hanok Village, which was super cool but a little crowded for me. So we walked around a bit, got some mochi, and then went back on the bus. After the full route, we got off and walked around Myeongdong a bit. We found some pretty cool shops along the way, did a bit of shopping, and of course, tried a lot of good street food like taiyaki, crepes, my personal fave, tteokbokki. We walked around a bit more, incidentally stumbled upon the Hello Kitty Cafe, which was a big win. Day 6. Traveling to Japan. After a short flight and a lot of trains, we arrived in Hakone, Japan. We were too tired to do anything that evening, but let's take a moment of appreciation for this ryokan. It was the most expensive part of our trip, and I could certainly see why. Day 7. We took the lift up Owakadani Mountain to see the sulfur vents, and yes, it was very stinky. Then we took the lift all the way down to Lake Ashi and went on a little boat ride. We walked quite a bit around Hakone, but it was a bit expectedly touristy here, so we didn't stick around here too long, but did stop by 7-Eleven of course, and headed back a bit early to enjoy our private onsen. And when I tell you this was nice, I mean so nice. We pretty much just spent the rest of our time here. Day 8. After our sad separation with the onsen, we were on our way back to Tokyo. In between quite a few trains, including the romance car, it took us pretty much the whole day to get back in the city. So we relaxed for the rest of the evening. Day 9. Tokyo, Japan. We headed straight to Shibuya to find out what's going on, and found our first Pokemon Center, and it was indeed very glorious and had more Gen 1 Pokemon plushies than I expected. So I pretty much picked up one of every Gen 1 plush I didn't have, and attracted a lot of looks. We also got some goods from the Nintendo store, walked around a little, found some manga, and headed back to secure the goods. Goods secured. Then we walked around a bit more, took some trains, and wandered a bit. Day 10. We visited Pokemon Center Tokyo DX, and found a few more Gen 1 sitting plushies I was needing. We went to the infamous Don Quixote, and tried a 7-Eleven Strawberry Sando too. Day 11. We headed over to Shinjuku and got a bit lost on the way, but we finally found it, and the infamous Godzilla head, and then wandered around until we got tired. Day 12. We took a longer train out to Sumida, and if you're wondering why, it was of course to visit Pokemon Center Skytree Town. By this point, I didn't find too many plushes that I didn't already have, but I did find some sleeping plushies here, and there was also the Kirby Cafe in this building. It also was a pretty area to walk around, so we took our time on the way back. Day 13. We went out a bit further today and headed over to Setagaya to see Gadakoji Temple, otherwise known as the Lucky Cat Temple. And of course, we got a Maneki Neko to bring back. Then we wandered around for a couple of hours and went back for the day. Day 14. This was our last day in Japan, and I knew I wanted to see Harajuku. It was far too crowded here for me, but we did find this massive Wiggle Wiggle store. And lastly, I saved my tattoo appointment for the final day. Pokemon, of course. Day 14. Traveling back home. We had an unfortunate flight cancellation that made us travel for over 30 hours, but we finally made it back home. So, how'd it go? Overall, I'd say pretty good, but traveling as a disabled person always has its ups and downs. First off, I knew it was going to be busy visiting during cherry blossom season, but I did not expect it to be that busy. I know, silly of me. It's also just more challenging visiting busier cities when I'm not used to them. Like, even non-busy times were overwhelming for me. It was also really apparent because some days we would get it right, like going to Latte World on a weekday and it being completely empty, and some days, not so much. So as a result, we ended up leaving a lot more touristy places quicker than usual, which was totally fine with me. Just take a picture and go. Probably the only really bad day was that first Sunday because it was supposed to rain all day, and we had the bright idea to visit the mall because it was inside and massive. Apparently, so did the entire city of Seoul. Initial red flag, the cab driver wouldn't drop us off next to the mall. We saw why. We walked into the mall, and I can only imagine this in American terms as like going to a Black Friday sale 10 years ago, like person to person, shoving by, no room. So we instantly decided to leave, but here was the problem. Every single cab system in Seoul was so busy. The cabs that were normally so easy to get were impossible. We waited for over an hour outside the mall trying to get a cab with no luck. We also were on the completely other side of town, and I couldn't handle public transit at that point. And of course, I forgot my umbrella too, so we walked multiple blocks in the pouring rain just to get far away enough so that a cab would pick us up. We sat absolutely drenched in a coffee shop for 30 minutes till finally we got a cab back to the hotel. When we got back, I went to an instant meltdown and soon after went to sleep and didn't wake up until the morning. Mind you, this was like 15 hours. But lesson learned, we took the next day easy and were a little bit more strategic on the places we visited after that. The second issue I ran into was losing my noise canceling headphones only a few days into the trip. I know, a literal nightmare, and I really was so mad at myself because I really pride myself on taking really good care of my belongings, so it was super upsetting. Shutdown followed, of course. We were considering buying new ones, and for context, I use AirPods, so it was going to be pretty spendy with the taxes and things like that, but luckily my partner also had noise-canceling headphones, so they let me use them for the rest of the trip. We also had a few unfortunate timings on Japanese trains that were indeed packed like sardines, but we only ever had to ride for a couple of stops, and with my mask, headphones, and my partner shielding me from other people, it was somewhat manageable. And honestly, for 2 weeks in a completely new environment, I think that was pretty good. So things that went well. Honestly, I have to talk about these business class seats. No one told me rich people were hacking travel like this because never have I ever traveled with so much comfort, let alone any on a flight. Like I said earlier, we saved up many years of reward points to book these seats, which ended up being like 3 to 5 grand retail, which is wild. But yeah, they were really nice. I'm talking full 180 laydown. I slept probably half of both 12-hour flights, and that just made our travel days so much substantially better. I know that's not attainable for most, but honestly, I'm planning on saving up for another 5 years so I could travel like that again. It obviously was also just a really cool trip for me as a Korean person. I'm South Korean and have never been to Korea, but I've been in no contact with my Korean dad for almost 7 years because of a really rough childhood. Despite emigrating here and being bilingual, he didn't teach me a word of Korean growing up. We didn't eat the food, we didn't learn about the culture, which is honestly not even the worst thing he's done, unfortunately. So I had to figure all that on my own later in life, and now I've been learning Korean for a few years, so it was really exciting and healing to be able to visit there even without Korean relatives, even though it was really overwhelming and heartbreaking to do it without them. And there's just something so warm about being surrounded by people that look like you when you've always been the odd one out. I think I felt that for the first time visiting H Mart as a kid, going to San Francisco as an adult. It's just like, wow, Asian people everywhere. I love this. Which on the reverse side of that, I think we get a lot of cringy comments from white people visiting places like this, like, oh my gosh, I'm the only white person around? This is so weird. Yeah, that's how it feels for us all the time back home. Like, be more original. I also got to test out my Korean language skills a bit and just get absolutely humbled, so I think that's reignited my desire to keep studying. Obviously, visiting all the Pokemon centers in Japan was such a big deal for me. I brought back way too much stuff. I'm glad we packed extra suitcases because I absolutely needed them for all the Pokemon plushies. Pretty much the entire budget I had for everything went to Pokemon plushies and a few Animal Crossing plushies, and I have no regrets about this, but this brings me to what I brought back. Unpacking the plush suitcase. As you can see, there's a lot of plushies stuffed in here, so let's go through them. Pokemon plushes. I essentially bought every sitting Gen 1 plush I didn't have yet and some of the larger specialty plushes. Some of my personal faves are this large Venonat, this connected Cubone and Marowak plush, these brightly colored Porygon and Dratini plush keychains, this Scream Tail plush because Jigglypuff is my favorite, Soda Pop Vulpix because these are super hard to find in the US, this very sweet Sleeping Charizard plush, this cute layered all creamy plush, and this larger coughing plush. Now I've yet to figure out where these are going, but I'll definitely need to clear some more shelf room, so stay tuned for updates on this when I have the time to reorganize this whole area. Pokemon merch. Honestly, I'm mostly a plush collector, but I did find some other cool items worth bringing back. So here's some faves. These Evolution line charms and my two favorite lines of course, this Bluetooth Jigglypuff speaker, this very sweet Jigglypuff blind box I got on the first try, these super cool vintage Pokemon figures I found secondhand at Mandarake, and these Japanese Pokemon Center stickers. Animal Crossing plushes. These are super hard to find back home, so I was so stoked to find these at the Nintendo store. Miscellaneous items. My wallet is lucky I'm not a hardcore Sanrio fan, but I did find a few other items I liked. So here's some faves. This large Lucky Cat statue straight from Gadakoji Temple, and a very silly tiny Lucky cat statue, a ceramic cheese dish from the Kirby Cafe, Totoro nesting dolls that I've been trying to get for years, this little doggy incense holder, a King D2D plush, and a custom portrait from Acorn Caricature, and an honorable mention for these exclusive Pokemon Center totes. Travel Q&A. I posted a couple of weeks ago in my story to grab some questions about travel and the trip, so we're going to go through them. And I did answer quite a few of these in earlier parts of the video, especially the accommodations, but we're going to go through the rest here. Did you bring your safe foods? And did you dine out at all? Yes. I brought a lot of safe food snacks for travel especially, but in this particular trip, I knew I was going to have safe foods in Korea and Japan, from sweets, ramen, and rice, so it wasn't as big of a deal for me. We didn't dine in a lot and frequently got takeout, mostly to be COVID conscious, but also because my partner does not have eating restrictions like I do, and they eat everything I don't. How did you travel COVID consciously? Were masks more accepted there? Yes. For us, this looked like testing rigorously before and after to make sure we weren't bringing disease in or bringing it back. We wore masks on all transit, indoor spaces, and anywhere that was overly crowded. Both Korea and Japan have largely normalized wearing masks over the years, so actually there was way more people masking than in the US, and it wasn't weird at all. No harassment, I didn't feel like I got weird looks for wearing a mask like I do back at home. We largely avoided dining in, doing takeout, eating outside, or eating completely private spaces, except when it wasn't an option, like not eating or drinking on a 12-hour plane just isn't possible. And yes, there are masks with straws and ways to eat through them, but they're just not something I can personally handle with my sensory issues, so what we largely did was just eat less frequently, eat after people on flights. But the reality is, even being as responsible as you can, it's always going to be a risk traveling during a pandemic. We're personally able to take that risk, but not everybody else can. The majority of people are not masking, and especially at airports, which is really scary and dangerous. That's why with even taking all these precautions, it was super important for me that we quarantined for 2 weeks when we got back and had zero contact with anybody. And yes, I do have permanent fatigue from long COVID, and I don't want to get any more repeat infections, so yes, taking these precautions will always be worthwhile for me, especially when it comes to caring about my community of disabled people. Would you say Korea and Japan were disability friendly? How about queer or trans friendly? As far as disability goes, I think one of the oddest things about both Korea and Japan is just how little disabled people I saw. I could honestly count how many disabled people I saw on my fingers the entire trip, and it was mostly old people. So yes, we do know disabled people exist everywhere, so this was a little concerning for me. Seoul is also literally on a giant hill, and these stairs in Japan are just as bad as they said they were, and the workarounds are not that great. The streets are narrow, bumpy, there's stairs that get into every store, and although there usually is elevators in public spaces, they're usually quite a bit to get to. And this is pretty similar to my experiences traveling in Europe as well. All these older cities just haven't been updated, and it really sucks. But one thing I will say, as someone who's had their fair share of horrific travel bathroom stories, is that Japan and Korea have bathroom access figured out. I'm talking bathrooms everywhere, relatively clean, large, always nearby. And as someone with chronic IBS, this is a big deal, so I will give them kudos for that. But another issue I ran into is that because it was so incredibly crowded, people would accidentally kick my cane a lot. I had to go without my cane for a lot of the trip because this was such a problem, and that's such a privilege because not everyone can just not use their cane. I definitely got some looks for being visibly autistic, for stimming, for being overwhelmed, but honestly, that's not really much different than back home. On being queer and trans friendly, I don't feel super qualified to answer that question, being in a het passing relationship and not looking visibly trans. I was only there for a week in each place, but did I see other queer people? Yes. Did I see a lot of them? No. Does that mean they're not there? No. I've seen others more impacted in my community speak to this, so I'm going to let them lead the conversation on this, but yes, deeply rooted homophobia and transphobia exists everywhere, especially back at home in the US. What about traveling as someone with tattoos, as an unconventional looking person? Honestly, I feel like this fear of tattooed people, particularly in Asia, is super dramatized by the internet. Yes, many traditional bathhouses do have restrictions on tattoos, and some old people will probably give you dirty looks, but respectfully, I get those looks in the US too. There's also many bathhouses that do allow tattoos. You can go to a private one like me, and it's also such a small activity of all the things you can do there. But I have pretty visible tattoos that weren't covered, and I felt fine. I also have pink hair, dress like this, look like this. I pretty much get stares wherever I go. I will say, not a lot of people have tattoos there, and in Korea particularly, a lot of people dress very neutral. I did stick out quite a bit, but I didn't get harassed for it because obviously I look like a foreigner. But I'm no stranger to dealing with weird looks. I'm really focused on where I'm going, how I'm going to get there, and not have a meltdown doing it. Any respectful tips for foreigners? I don't want to regurgitate the very same tips that I feel like I see all over social media, but of course, be respectful, be mindful, don't be super loud. I think especially in regards to being autistic and having food aversions, I tell people to be really cautious about their reactions to food in different places. There's definitely an added layer of racism when white people call Asian food gross, gag, or have really strong physical reactions, even if they can't help it. So if you know you have really strong food aversions, bring your own food. Take the food to go and eat it privately, but don't be vocal about how someone else's food is gross, okay? Also reiterating again to not make comments or content around going to the Korean store with my Korean boyfriend to buy Korean things because I'm in Korea. Don't make not being Asian your whole personality for visiting Asia. Most of these comments come off super weird and super infantilizing. Not everything in Asia is super cute, okay? Do you need to learn the language? No, but I think it's cool and polite to learn a few basic phrases. That being said, a lot of autistic and disabled people struggle with communication and talking in general, so don't feel pressured if it's not something you can do. But do think of ways to use that in your alternate communication method, like using cards or phrases in their language, using your phone to translate and point to things. Overall, it's just nice not to assume that everyone else speaks English. But yes, a lot of Korean and Japanese people also speak English, especially in touristy places, and almost all the signs are in English too. But if you're visiting somewhere abroad, it can be a really cool experience to learn more about the culture, the language, and really immerse yourself. How was TSA? Coming back into the US. Once again, I don't think I represent all trans experience as a non-binary person who doesn't look visibly trans. Personally, I got through TSA just fine, and I have an X marker on my passport, but I can't say the same for everyone else. I'm also a natural-born citizen of the US, I have light skin. These are definitely privileges to consider. It's an especially scary time to travel right now as a marginalized person, and I don't want to downplay that. Especially if you're not a natural-born citizen, look visibly marginalized, or work in advocacy, this could be incredibly dangerous, so please do be careful, friends. Could you bring your medications abroad? Yes. But the only prescribed medication I have right now is birth control to skip my periods. Everything else I take is over the counter and doesn't have restrictions, but there is restrictions on stimulants. So if you take those, please do your research because there is documentation that's needed in advance. Differences for packing domestically versus internationally? Personally, I don't have a lot of differences for packing either because I kind of assume I'm going to need everything no matter where I'm going. If you're used to being able to pick up certain things on a trip, that could be completely different in another country. You may not be able to easily replace or buy another item if you lose it or don't bring it. And language barriers can cause increased inaccuracies when reading labels, so do be careful about that. I think the really only special thing we did for this trip was just packing another suitcase in our suitcase so we had more room to bring stuff back, but also you can pick up suitcases wherever you go too. How do you manage overheating and dressing while traveling? My neck fan is my biggest help for this. I take this wherever I go, and especially while masking, this can be a big help for overheating. I also always dress in layers and a bit lighter than the average person, but I pack more than the average person because I want to be prepared for everything. I check the weather a lot in advance so I can pack and prepare for it. And I know we all want to look cute on vacation, but comfort is my #1 priority. So I'll be dressed in loose clothing, my most comfortable sneakers, and still look really cute doing it. How do you manage chronic pain while traveling? Well, how do you manage chronic pain all the time? I think this largely depends on the person and their particular type of pain. My cane is super important to me, so of course that comes with me wherever I go. If you use heating or cooling packs at home, bring those too. I use a lot of over-the-counter meds too for everyday symptoms. But largely, managing chronic pain while on vacation is just being careful to not overdo it. Taking lots of breaks, not overexerting yourself, not being afraid to cancel plans if you need it. And as I mentioned earlier in this video, being disabled means I don't always get to see or do everything while traveling. But my quality of travel is so much better when I'm not in excruciating pain. That being said, I'm always in pain, and that's just kind of my reality as someone with hypermobile EDS. How much did you spend on the trip? This pains me to say, and I don't handle our finances, but for traveling for 2 weeks in Korea and Japan, we spent $6,000. And like I said earlier, we got all the flights free through points, which is usually one of the biggest expenses. Lodging had to be the most expensive with a whopping $2,500, with most of that going to the very private onsen we stayed at for a couple of days, and we pretty much ate out for every meal, so that was around $1,000 for the two of us. Transit, buses, cab fares, and other small activities were around another $1,000. And because I have a special interest in Pokemon, I brought back around $900 in Pokemon plushes and other merch, and my partner probably spent $500 on clothes and some fancy shoes. And for complete transparency, you could do this trip so much cheaper. But yes, being disabled is really expensive. This is not normally something we have the ability to spend this kind of money on, but we've been saving up for this trip for almost 3 years, and we knew we wanted to be a little extra about it because this was such a big deal for us. But yes, this trip was a big privilege, and that's not lost on me. It's a big privilege financially, mentally, and physically to be able to do something like this. Will we be doing anything like this again soon? Absolutely not, but I will be saving up my miles so we can do something like this again in the next 5 years. But I think that's all, friends. And while I'll be honest with you that this trip was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience for me, it also was a lot of work, and I'm super happy to finally be home again. And as always, if you have any other questions, just let me know in the comments below. Bye, friends. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and follow me on all my platforms for semi-daily content.